My name is David Gillam from Carlisle in Cumbria. I'd like to share my story with you. I was involved in a road traffic accident 29 years ago this weekend. Broke my back in 3 places, severe spinal damage, and was left with double incontinence. After many years, I was awarded £1.5 million compensation to take care of me, my ever-changing needs. I'd like to share my story and tell you how the money was placed into the Special Needs Trust Fund and stolen. The Special Needs Trust Fund had been set up, and this had to be managed by a financial chartered accountant and trustees. My brother Ian Gill, a successful businessman, told me that his own financial chartered accountant, Mr. David Allen, would be the ideal person as he specialised in trust funds. David Allen said he knew a person called Elizabeth Martin who had been a trustee, and she would be the ideal person to be trustee of my special needs trust. The entire trust fund of £1.5 million was stolen within 12 months by local criminals into taking the lease of a nightclub. It finished me. Introduction then, outside of going back to my car to the railway station, was the introduction of Stuart Jardine. Stuart Jardine was an undercover police inspector from Cumbria Police. Approached me at the station, tapped on the window and told me my name. Quite alarmed because I'd never met this guy before. Then proceeded to tell me that the money in my trust fund had been stolen and he was going to apprehend the people, and then he started to name them. David Allen, the accountant, John Hodgson, Elizabeth Martin and Ian Gill. I was quite shocked because, again, I didn't know this guy. I asked him could he prove who he was, and he then proceeded to show me his badge, and he was a Cumbrian police inspector. He stated to me very clearly that he was an undercover police officer. He was wearing brown leather jacket, t-shirt, jeans, training shoes. I then asked how he'd got this information, and he told me he wasn't allowed to share that with me at that time, but he would work with me to bring these people to justice. I had no reason to doubt him. He then told me under no circumstances was I allowed to go to Cumbria Police Station or to contact any police officer in Carlisle and tell them that I was working with him. He assured me that my safety was paramount and he would look after me, but then telling me intelligence in Carlisle Police Station had shown there was bent coppers. These officers, he said, might be part of the gang that stole my money. He then couldn't help me with my safety. I was pretty scared. The same day that I seen Stuart Jardine, I had to get my phone number. I had to give him my phone number, and how he done it was he read out his phone number and I had to ring his phone at Carlisle railway station. He said he would be in touch with me very frequently and not to be alarmed, but if there was any problems at all, I must ring him. That evening, whilst at home, my phone rang and it was Inspector Stuart Jardine. And he said where he'd met me today at Carlisle railway station on the disabled parking spot. I had to meet him there again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and take with me my bank account details, which was Barclays Bank, and my special needs trust fund details. Asking him why did he need this, and then he told me that he would be able to trace where the money was getting placed into out of my trust fund and if they would actually into my bank account. Again, no reason to doubt the guy. I felt quite reassured that somebody was there. I thought he was going to protect me, but I just couldn't face it on my own. It's pretty difficult being in my disabled situation. I was scared. The phone calls started becoming more often, 2-3 times in a day, and he was telling me every time he spoke to me he knew where I'd been, and I asked him was I getting followed, And he says, I can't tell you. He says, but he seemed to know where I'd been, if I went to the shops or I'd nipped to town, or he knew exactly where I'd been. So I was pretty scared. The next thing came, which was very, very alarming. I was sat at home one evening on my own. I lived in the countryside, and there was lights in the hedge across the way from me. So I never thought anything. I thought maybe somebody had broke down. And my phone went, and it was Stuart Jardine, and he told me not to be alarmed, but he was across the road. And I says, why, what's happening? He said, I'm parked in my car, he says, and he flashed the lights. I said, right, what's happening? He said, intelligence from Carlisle Police Station, and he'd got the information that I was going to be abducted. And he said there was every chance that I was going to be murdered. I was really, really scared. And he asked me who was in the house. I said, I'm at home on my own. And he said, well, don't worry. He said, I'll sit here. He said, I'll wait here for a while. I says, but what will you do? He said, don't worry. He says, because he said, I can get back up here. He says, quicker than you can think I can. I had no reason to doubt him. And I said, listen, I said, I can't protect myself. And he kept on saying to me, don't worry. But he named the people that were going to do it, that were going to come and harm me. And I says, what is going to happen? He said, listen, they're going to come and harm you. He said, they're going to murder you. He says, and intelligence is clearly saying that they're going to take you to the northeast. He says, just stay calm and I'll stop here for now. But don't worry, backup will be with me as soon as I can possibly get it, if anybody comes to the property. Nothing came of the threats, and I was pretty worried for a little while. And Jardine told me that, down to intelligence, he would look after me. And thinking back now, he reeled me in to believe in him, and it probably never was going to happen. But I didn't know at the time. He just seemed to know so much about me, and it got to the point where he knew about bills that were getting paid out of my actual personal Barclays bank account. Anyways, after the 2 years, it got less and less. And one particular day, I went round to a friend's house to take her down to the shops, and she called me into the property. And she said, would you like a quick cuppa before we went? And as I went in to the property, standing at the top of her stairs was Inspector Stuart Jardine in a pair of boxer shorts. And he looked at me and he scurried away. And I said to my friend, what is he doing here? She said, he took me out for a meal. And I says, do you know him? And she said, yeah. She said, he took me out for a meal. So anyways, by this time, I was having a cup of tea with this lady, and Jardine went out the property and left, banged the door and went. So I then asked the young lady, why was this guy here? And she says, well, to tell you the truth, she said, he was asking questions about you and wanting to know what you were doing. And I says, what did you tell him? She says, I just said you were my friend. And she said, but he was persistent at wanting to know who I was speaking to and who I was sharing information with. After 2 years, Stuart Jardine disappeared, and I kept on ringing the phone number and it wouldn't connect. I was pretty upset, because he said he was going to be there to protect me. Then, a year or so later, out of the blue, a guy knocked on my door, and this guy introduced himself as Detective Constable James Gorill of Cumbria Police Force. And he said he would like to speak to me regarding the talks that I'd had with Inspector Stuart Jardine. James Gorill then asked me, could I give him my bank account details, which was my Barclays bank account and my Special Needs Trust Fund. He was going to investigate it, but then a couple of months later came back to me and told me that Inspector Stuart Jardine had never logged any crimes, and he was more than sure there wasn't anything he could possibly do. When James Gorill come to visit me, he never came in a police vehicle. He was always alone, And every time he came to see me, he came on a motorbike. The motorbike was parked across the road, and he always came in with the motorbike gear on and carrying his crash helmet. I always wondered why he came on his own, and I asked him the question, and he said nobody needed to know. James Gorill then told me that he wanted to take a DNA test, and I was quite concerned, asking why, and he said it was just in case I was murdered, and at least they could identify my body. This was very worrying, but he told me not to worry, and it was all part of the procedure that he would follow. Now we go back to Stuart Jardine. Whilst he was a serving police officer, he started up a company and used David Allen as his accountant. But this is the police inspector that was investigating David Allen for criminal acts. When I lost my money, John Hodgson, Town and Country Roofing, he stole £125,000 off me. He said it was for a loan to purchase a property. The very next day, he came to my house and pinned me up against the wall and told me that if I told anybody, police or anybody, he would find out, and he would make me even more disabled than I already was. When I passed over this information to Detective Constable James Gorill said, we'll just keep that out the mix for now. He said, because I would be charged with money laundering. I couldn't understand why, because I could prove where I got my money from. Could John Hodgson prove where he got his from? James Gorill clearly states that no crimes have been reported for 6 years. Evidence that I have, and Cumbria Police headed paper with senior police officers show otherwise. We have pointed out huge errors in James Gorill's investigation into my case. The fax machine explanation that James Gorill wrote down is absolutely ridiculous. The fax machine would be plugged in and it would operate from the phone line that it was plugged into. I went and asked 3 individual telephone engineers, and they all clearly stated to myself that the fax machine with the fax paper would give the number exactly where it came from. I was quite fortunate. I managed to get the help from a charitable organisation, and I had a brief access to a barrister who drafted a report and named individuals and identified that the signatures were forged on 3 faxes. The faxes were withdrawals for a total of just over £350,000. DC Gorill stated that Elizabeth Martin had money from my trust fund to purchase furniture. In 2002, furniture was purchased for me out of furniture shops in mid-Wales. I had the statements to prove it, and this was all done and completed by the insurance people that looked after my accident. We have just found out now that James Gorill has been retired from Cumbria Police Force. The Commissioner now refuses to communicate with myself. Only last week in our local newspaper, a serving Cumbrian CID officer, now retired but works alongside Cumbria Police, was sent to jail for passing over information, and Mr. Barry Cowan also was part of the CID officers that investigated my case.